All right, everybody. I am here with Dr. Christle. I'm going to say your last name because we were on before. It's Guevara.
Yes. Yay.
Yay. Dr. Guevara. Christle. We'll call you Dr. Christle, though it sounds more fun that way. Dr. Christle, today, I'm going to let her kind of introduce herself, but I want to just say a little bit about her first because I love a good resume and it always sounds great. So Dr. Christle has a private telemedicine medical practice. She also is a traveling physician for U.S. figure skating and is a project manager, I guess, because that's how you had to wrap it up, for RP Strength, which is an online kind of coaching community, right?
And also, we also are in the space of nutrition and training apps as well. So that's also
so like education, YouTube, nutrition, training, all of the things, fitness,
everything. Yes.
Yeah. And I started following you. It's probably kind of different because I've listened to several of your podcasts just to kind of get to know you a little bit. I feel like I've talked to you for like days now because I've been listening to all of your podcasts. I actually started following you before Dr. Mike. So, usually people are like, oh, I know Dr. Mike. And I actually knew of you before that. So I come from a bodybuilding background. I'm a competitive bodybuilder. I'm an NPC judge. And so I love all the things. Powerlifting, bodybuilding, all the things. And of course, with muscle around my age. And then I put it together. I'm like, because my husband listens to Dr. Mike and I'm like, they're married. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why I started following Dr. Christle. She's just a girl of muscle and power and somebody who loves muscle and is not afraid. And that's my gang.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. You summed it up quite perfectly.
Yeah. So, and she also lives in Michigan, you all, right?
Yes. We do. We live near Ann Arbor, which is like not Detroit, which is a little far away. We'll drive from Detroit.
Yes. So I am a few minutes from Flint.
Okay.
So I know the area. You're about 40 minutes from us.
Yeah.
So really close. So those that are in Michigan, you guys can relate. So anyway, I wanted to talk to Dr. Christle and have her tell us a little bit about her story. She has a really great weight loss story for those of you that are listening and a lot of my community, a lot of women over 35, many have struggled with their weight. So you have a lot to share.
Oh my gosh.
So Dr. Christle, let's let you have the table here and let's talk. What is your story? Why did you get into being a physician? And then just really briefly, I know there's not a ton of time, and then kind of what brought you into the fitness space.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, there's lots of things to be said of like how I ended up going into medicine. I think a big, I'd be lying if I said that how like my physique and like how I navigated nutrition growing up didn't play a big role in it, because I think especially with in the Asian community, I'm Filipino. I was always overweight. I was always about 20, 30, 40 pounds heavier than the rest of my peers. I always had an appetite. So you kind of get put into two camps. You get put into the like, oh, you're very gorgeous and beautiful, or, oh, you have a pretty face, but like you're really smart. And so I felt like not necessarily like, I always felt that I was bigger than, like, I always knew that without my parents or my family sort of mentioning my weight. So I don't really blame them or feel like, they're the cause of like me feeling this, because I remember being 2 years old and like looking at my next door neighbor and just being like, wow, I'm bigger than her. But like my grandmother always sort of praised me for excelling in school. So, naturally, like, okay, well, if I get straight A's, like, my grandmother pays me money and like I get to, eat whatever I want, without really much abandon. So, between that, I always did well in school. And so I always felt like school was going to be my thing. Right. Like, and so, I ended up going to grad school for organic chemistry. I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to teach chemistry. I wanted to do research. And I just felt like somewhere in between, making drugs in like this, in this lab kind of by myself, thinking about what actually is all involved with being a professor in a large academic institution. And I just really felt like there was something else that was missing, like the connection, like actually being able to sort of help people by interacting with them, like being
Yeah.
able to talk to them and work with them, to provide, help for all sorts of chronic diseases. So I was like, all right, I'm out. I'm going to med school. So I was in my late 20s. I made the transition. I did a post back and then applied to med school, got into med school. And that's kind of how I ended up navigating this path, to medicine.
Yeah. Very cool. So you were very smart, and you leaned into that, which is great.
Yeah, yeah.
When I was in high school, I would tell my son this because he's naturally very smart,
Mhm.
and it's work when you get into
Yeah,
the upper grades. You can't just
yeah,
breathe through everything at some
right.
points. And when you're little, you just like, oh, you're smart, smart, smart. You
Yeah,
don't have to work, and then you have to start working at some
yeah.
point. I think when I was pretty smart when I went into high school. I was in very advanced math classes, and
Mhm.
I had a different life growing up, and I chose not to work. And I still kick myself now because I just think, gosh, I could have been so smart. Not that I'm stupid, but you know what I mean? Like I could have excelled academically,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
if I would have leaned into it. So that's what I mean is you leaned into that. And that's awesome because I love smart people.
There were some trade-offs, though. There were definitely some trade-offs, and there were definitely some very hard life lessons,
Mm,
to kind of, uh, be, sort of said about that. I mean, I think, I didn't do so well in high school, so that's also one thing that I kind of got into the wrong crowd.
mhm.
I was really just doing the standard, this was like mid 1990s where, the salad diet, the what
Yeah.
was it? The like cabbage soup diet. Like
Cabbage
I
soup.
really wanted to be skinny.
Mm,
And I wanted to do it by all means possible. And so I
mm,
would crash diet. And so between hanging out with people who didn't go to school and, trying to like starve myself, with these binge diet episodes, like my brain wasn't really functioning. I
yeah.
remember being in like honors classes or AP classes and just one year, like, uh freshman year was great, partway through sophomore year was great, and then junior and senior year it was just like there was that sharp like sort of decline. I was just like this kind of barely functioning person. I don't know how I got into university. Barely got in by the skin of my teeth, but once I got into undergrad, I started to like I got my first C plus in general chemistry, and I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm done. Like I'm done being dumb. Like let's lean into like really
Yeah.
lean into this.
Yeah.
But the trade-off was because I had crash dieted and felt like my brain just wasn't processing and I wasn't functioning. I really did a 180 and like leaned into like I'm just going to eat whatever I want and like, whatever I will do whatever it takes to be at the top academically, and that led to me being, 4'11" and like 198 pounds and like
Yeah.
smoking a pack a day, which was just
Mhm.
not exactly the best, not the
Yeah.
best life choices.
Yeah, yeah. See, there's always a trade-off, right?
Right.
But then you realize that you wanted to be with the people. You didn't just want to be
Yes.
behind the scenes. You wanted to be with the people because it's rewarding and
Right.
the communities are fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I definitely enjoyed like actually talking to people
yeah,
versus
yeah.
just sort of like, okay, I made this molecule, like please feed it to rats and let's see if it,
Which is
helps.
really cool.
Which
It's
is awesome.
a great experience. But
Awesome.
you found out what you didn't want to do. So that's
Yeah.
really cool. And so you have your own. So there you are.
Mhm.
You were, I guess you could fall into the overweight category at that point.
Oh yeah.
And then you sort of found yourself into the gym. I know you have some competitive powerlifting background. Again,
Yeah.
I followed you for some of
Yeah.
these stories. But how did you find yourself back into exercising? So here's somebody
Yeah.
that's kind of maybe wrapped up in a career. So this is where we
Mhm.
can relate this to life
Mhm.
as well. Wrapped up in a career or school or what have
Yeah.
you, just kind of life. And you find yourself in this position, and it's almost suddenly, right?
Yeah.
Because you wake up one day and you're like, oh, wow, like how did I get here? And what's the process to get me out? So kind of what was that process and what
Yeah.
made you think I don't feel this way anymore?
My joints started to hurt. Like
Mhm.
I would just do simple tasks like driving and like my arms would go numb. I I had always been sort of active. Like, I played sports as a kid, so I wasn't oh, didn't grow up completely sedentary, but I knew that like, okay, smoking's bad for you. Like my lungs are actually like on fire, like getting up
Mhm.
the stairs. Like noticing that activities of daily living that I just now never take for granted, like walking a block down the street, just
Yeah.
became a little bit hard when I have that extra body weight carrying around. And
How old were
uh,
you at this point? At this point, because I
oh,
imagine wasn't that pretty young to get
still, yeah, I took 2 extra years in undergrad because of scholarships. So I must have been about 23,
Mhm.
22, 23, 24
Yeah.
around that time, so early 20s. Still very, young, but, like, just felt dead inside, like, I felt like I
Yeah.
had the body of a 50-year-old, just
Mhm.
struggling to even do stuff, so,
Yeah.
um, I think that the thing that I was just like, "Okay, a hard stop, this just needs to end," is the cigarettes, and so I just quit that cold turkey, and I'm very thankful that I've been able to do that without, having to do a wean plan or do Nicorette gum or
Yeah.
any of the other medications that are also really helpful for some people. Um, but,
That's awesome. But
yeah.
still very hard, but
Oh,
awesome.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It was the worst 3 weeks of my life. I will tell you that because it was a mixture of caffeine, like weaning off of caffeine, completely cutting off cigarettes cold turkey,
Mm,
and then kind of thinking about, "Okay, how am I gonna get back into the gym? How am I going to sort of slowly transform my life into something else because this isn't it, and I know it's not it."
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really important, and that's kind of probably unique, and that's maybe one of the reasons that, that you are in the position you're in to help people
Yeah.
because what I find even on the online coaching aspect or, I'm also a cardiac rehab director, so I work
Yeah.
with patients as well, and I find that um a lot of people really just forget what it feels like to feel well. So
Mhm.
they stop striving.
Mhm.
And that seems to have them give up over and over again because they're like, well, what's the point? Because this
Uh-huh.
one time of not smoking doesn't help my lungs, or this one or two salads or
Oh,
week of salads that was hard for me to do
yeah.
doesn't give me results. So
Yeah.
for you to have that inner drive of saying, this ain't it. Like
Right.
I'm 23, 25 years old. I
Yeah.
shouldn't feel like this. That's unique. So, you kind of had that drive too. And you just sort of kind of self did that. You did that. You built those habits. You said, I have this big goal. What's going
Yeah.
to help me to get there? And that's kind of what we teach at coaching, right? Because you coach
Oh,
people
yeah,
too.
and don't get me wrong, I have hired a bunch of coaches. I've hired coaches from RP, I've hired coaches from Girls Gone Strong, I've hired, bodybuilding prep coaches,
Yep.
and, all of
Coaches
them.
need coaches. I have a
Right,
coach and I'm a
exactly.
coach. I had a
Yeah,
coach during my bodybuilding years for the same one for a decade.
yeah.
I'm firm believer in coaches need coaches for sure, but you still had that kind of that I need to do this, but I need somebody to help.
Right, and always thinking about, like, okay, well, if things didn't work out the way I wanted it to, like, what is something that I can still learn from this
Mhm.
experience, right? Like, I think also trying to reframe that because, it's been years since I've had a nutrition coach in particular, just
Yeah.
a live coach, but and I remember there were times where, a coach had to just real talk me and say, "Hey, maybe this isn't a good time for fat loss. You are in a
Yeah.
spot where you've been dieting for a whole year. Like
Mm.
you seem like your energy levels are in the tank. You're telling me you're not sleeping well, you're not performing well. Let's just figure out where, a plan or some sort of structure that you can consistently do that isn't going to cause you to like starve yourself and then binge into oblivion because that's exactly what happened after a year of dieting and sort of binging and like not saying anything to my other coach and then finally I gave up and just I blew back up 30 pounds trying to figure out what I did wrong, what was wrong with me.
Yeah, yeah, kinda like the rebound effect, right?
Oh
When
yeah.
when
Oh, yeah.
somebody's dieting, for a competition.
Right.
And again, you and I are of the same age bracket. And I think we both grew up in the 90s with Suzanne Summers and,
Yes.
all those things. That's when like IFBB, like fitness was on ESPN.
Yeah. Oh,
Remember
yeah.
that?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
First watch. I remember watching those like, oh,
Yeah.
if I had
Yeah.
any skill, I would do that, but I
Yeah.
can't do those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
American Gladiators was also on, and then before the WWE, it was the WWF, like, every
Yep.
Sunday, we're just like, "Wow, these guys are so cool," like, we get to
Yeah.
beat each other up.
Mhm. Yeah, and so you lost your weight and then you gained it back and you realized, okay, well, something else is going on. I want to talk about kind
Yeah.
of of course, the GLP-1. We all know we're going to
Yeah.
talk about that. But before that,
Yeah.
is that when you did your powerlifting? Before you did?
Oh, yeah. Got in yes, 100% yes. I was doing, my first powerlifting meet was in 2013.
Okay, so
So, and I
just a
knew
little while ago.
just a little, just like, when was that first one? I think my last one was in 2018,
Okay.
and sort of the thought, I enjoyed powerlifting. I enjoyed lifting heavy.
Mhm.
As far as physique goes, I was like, you know what? Like, I still enjoy training hard. I still enjoy lifting hard. I still love this, even though whatever physique stuff is going on right now, like, I'm just gonna give it a rest. As long as I fuel myself, like, I'll be fine, you
Yeah.
know. So, but I feel like powerlifting was sort of that crutch of like, well, if I can't be lean or, then I'll just be strong and we'll just deal with, I guess we'll just deal with fat loss dieting some other time down the line because this fat loss dieting thing just isn't for me, I guess. It was sort of
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
thinking at the time.
Do you think that people, as a coach yourself and kind of in RP, and you've dealt with clients and patients alike, do you feel like people chase fat loss for too long, like as an end goal all the time? Do you see like maybe they're always fat loss, fat loss, fat loss? Like social media is like, oh, lose weight, lose fat, lose weight, lose fat. Do you feel like they chase that too long, or do you think it's like the opposite?
I feel like they chase the outcome a lot.
Yeah.
They want the fat loss,
Yeah. So that's
but
always their goal.
right, that's always their goal. And instead of reframing it as what are these habits that I have now in my day to day? And what are
Mhm.
some changes that I can make to my day to day habits to sort of get me on that path to fat
Mhm.
loss? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Oh,
yeah, you see it all the time. I mean, I've seen it all the time with, I feel like a lot of general population patients, once they have a very aesthetic goal, like plastic surgery,
mhm.
they'll come in, wanting a medical waiver signed or a physical exam saying that like they're all good to go. And
Mhm.
you take a look at it and it's just, well, we've got blood pressure, uncontrolled high blood pressure here. We've got uncontrolled diabetes here.
Yeah.
This is a hard thing to, like, if your goal is to get liposuction or some other cosmetic procedure, we need to take a couple steps back. We need to
Yeah. Yeah.
dial it back and see what are you doing, what is your exercise routine look like? What did you have for breakfast this morning before you came into the office?
Mhm.
Everyone tells me like, I eat salads, I eat lean chicken
Yeah.
breast, I eat
They
lean
eat
fish. And then it's
healthy.
like, right. And
Yeah.
then I'm like, what did you have this morning? Because I know that people, even I forget what I
Mhm.
had, 2 meals ago, but like the last meal I ate, I can provide some sort of context. And it's like, oh
Sure.
I went to Wawa and like, I had a bacon, sausage, breakfast sandwich and, a large, coffee that's like, filled with sugar and,
Yeah.
whipped cream. And you're like, okay, well, let's see how we can, modify this and, modify this diet and like, let's see where we can make little changes.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's actually a great idea, like a great question to ask. What did you have for breakfast? Because oftentimes I'll say, patients or clients like, hey, write down for 3 days what you're eating, and you're going to be better because you're writing it down. But
Right.
that's a great question. Okay, just tell me what you ate for breakfast and maybe dinner the night before you could
Right.
remember. And was
Right.
there a snack in between? Yeah, no,
Right.
that's a great idea because that kind of can give you the base of the picture of where they're coming at. So I love what you said about if somebody needs a medical clearance for some of these procedures that they're going to get a cosmetic procedure, and you as a physician can say, whoa, 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 like I want to support you and I'm all for any of these things that you want to do. But you need to take a look at your overall health and condition and let's do these steps first. So do you require them to kind of do those steps first, come back and then give them clearance? Is that kind of like how that works? Or is that like a perfect world?
Oh, so I got to take a step back because I feel like I've gotten yelled at for this. So we don't provide medical clearance. We calculate the risk of
Okay. Yeah.
post-op
Yeah. Okay.
complications, right? Only
Yeah.
because I got yelled at so bad. I almost peed in my pants when this
Oh
guy
no.
was
Yeah.
chewed me out. So it if the person if the like, yeah, I guess it depends on how badly their diabetes is uncontrolled, how badly, like, what other comorbid conditions they have.
And
I
you
never.
can only suggest because you can't make anybody do anything because they could go find another doctor.
Right, and they
Yeah.
can go find, and, they could go to a strip mall and find
Yeah.
some, do whatever. So, yeah,
Mhm.
no, I've had to tell people, like, I don't recommend, I think, here are your risk. It's very high because you have all these comorbid conditions. Here are what your labs look like. You plug it into a calculator and it spits out, like, what the risk is. And so,
Oh,
I
yeah.
print it up and it's like high risk. And then I will put, like, I don't recommend you do this.
Yeah.
I can't force you to not do it, but I highly suggest, let's take a step back otherwise. And then it becomes a difficult conversation.
Yeah, yeah, and then, people might be offended or they might go find, like you said, find somebody else or,
Yeah.
something like that. So as a telemedicine, do you ever suggest, and I guess you can't really prescribe fitness, can you? I mean, because
So
that's kind
my
of dream for some doctors, I think they want to be able to prescribe, a fitness and nutrition kind of, but how do you go about that? Because
so
obviously I know that would be a goal for you is to help people.
Right. I think so my practice is a lot different these days.
Mhm.
Um, so I feel like, I'm very thankful that a lot of my patients in my practice are pretty self-sufficient. For the most part, if anything, they're pretty self-motivated. So and I keep it very small by design because of
Yeah,
the other things that I do. Um, so I do give them suggestions and we do have conversations about where to go with their plan, but most of the time they are coming to me with their suggestions or what they
mhm.
want to do and then having a conversation surrounding that. So it's not sort of like I sell, X plan to, lose this weight or
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
build muscle, but it's always just an ongoing conversation. So I have some patients who, you know, um, use you know, different training apps. Some of them, half of them, track their own macros.
Mm,
Um, you know, a few of them we're still having those conversations of just building general good habits of
yeah.
getting a lean protein in, getting a lean protein in, getting, their vegetables in, and sort of, getting the
You get to
exercise in.
spend time with them and coach them almost a little bit through that. You get to have a little bit of time with them to coach
Yeah.
them because a lot
Yeah.
of doctors don't have that amount of time. Like I said, I work with cardiologists and
Yeah.
I mean, they wish that they had time to talk to their patients about each thing. They're seeing different, people
Right.
a lot, but that's where I come in as an intensive cardiac rehab where we get to teach those, but that's still people still have to come and they have to
Right.
qualify. you know,
Right.
where they don't get to spend that amount of time. So that's nice that you get to spend a little more time talking
Right.
with them. Mhm.
And then, yeah, no, it's work. If I was doing a traditional brick and mortar private practice, there's
Mhm.
absolutely no way that I would be able to even really kind of be a good provide much good advice for nutrition.
Yeah.
Like, we do some stuff. Like, I tried doing that as a resident, seeing 14 patients in like a
Mhm.
half day or something, 10 to
Oh,
15-minute visits. And
yeah.
try and do my best, but it was always rushed because you have a long list of other things you need to get through. The medical assistant needs to, take blood pressure, get vitals, check the med.
Mhm.
Like then the patient has like 50, different questions they want to follow up on. And
Yeah.
so sort of,
And you have
it-
such little time. I think that's so hard for physicians. I mean, it's hard. I feel like a lot of doctors wish that they could have some more time,
yeah.
with people to explain stuff, but they don't. Because, you hear it across the board. Well, doctors don't know anything about nutrition. Well, some might not, but a lot do pay attention, but they just don't have the time and resource to tell you because they have all these patients they have to see.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, for
Mhm.
sure. For sure.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah. So that's nice that you get to do that, telemedicine. Of course, we'll link that too for people. And so I wanted to talk before we run out of time because I feel like I could talk to you forever.
Okay.
Uh, I want to talk about your GLP-1
Yeah.
stuff because I have, like I said, a lot of online clients,
Yeah.
and I moved almost exclusively in the online space about
Yeah.
2016 or 2017 with coaching. And of course, women over 35 mostly.
Mhm.
And I have a handful of clients that have taken or do take GLP-1 medications. I am
Mhm.
in the camp of coaches where I have never had an issue with the GLP-1. I think that it's 2024, and I think we have so many things available to us.
Yeah.
But what I see um, in my own training
Yeah.
is I see not even from a coach's aspect, but from me caring about clients, is
Mhm.
that a lot of people want to take them
Mhm.
without the work.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
it's almost like a younger crowd. I would say like the late 20s to the early 30s.
Yeah.
They would say, well, my friend is taking X, Y, and Z. They get FOMO. They quit working out because they just want to be small at all costs. So it's not just a 90s thing. I don't think like what we
Yeah.
grew up in. I think it's just a 20-year-old thing sometimes.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the GLP-1 because you have your own story. So,
Yeah.
as a physician and a patient, you got prescribed GLP-1.
Mhm.
Why?
So, uh, a couple different reasons. One, I had actually failed a whole host of other medications that I was prescribed, either, FDA approved, off label, prior to that and had
Mhm.
failed miserably. Mike had actually created RP templates to cut because he noticed that my hunger signaling was just through the roof compared to anything he's ever seen before, and I
Mm.
failed that.
So you would say to him, like, I'm not full. Like, I still feel like I could keep eating.
Oh, yeah, so
Yeah.
because but my stomach was physically in pain because I had just chewed through 2 to 3 cups of broccoli with, some
Yeah.
lean chicken, some boring rice, some, bland, bodybuilder, not really palatable food. My stomach is hurting, but, I am still hungry, if, I can still get at it, and it's just where do we go from here, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm doing all the things. So now I have this distended, bloated abdomen
Mhm.
that, feels like I can't eat anymore, but I don't have that satiety feeling of being actually full. I'm just in pain and I'm hungry and now I'm
Yeah.
miserable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I know I've experienced that, post competition diets for sure.
Yeah.
One thing bodybuilding taught me was to not listen to my body. That's another conversation. I might not been the best physique, but I would always out diet anybody, and that's
Mhm.
a mental portion. But
Yeah.
physically, I understand what that feels like because I felt out of control.
Yeah.
I controlled it, but out of God-given willpower that
Yeah.
99% of people could not do. But I
Right.
understand what you're saying when you say that I feel physically full because I mean,
Mhm.
I put on, 40, 50 pounds after I competed. That's
Mhm.
another story,
Wow.
but it
Yeah.
was fast.
Wow.
And it
Yeah.
was, and it was not, I didn't feel full either. And I
Yeah.
still kind of have that kind of just maybe genetics. I don't know. Is that a genetic component where you just don't feel physically full or satisfied almost, and you can still eat?
I think that there is a genetic component to
Mhm.
how, maybe there might be some epigenetics. Maybe, I had gotten sort of a bad hand because I came out like an 8. I think I was like 8 pounds, eight and a
Mm,
half pounds. Like I was a big baby.
a big
So
baby.
out of
Yeah.
the womb, like, maybe my mom ate one too many burritos when she was pregnant with me.
Who knows?
She's 4'10" and she was 180
Okay.
when I was born. So some combination of that, but it was always hard in the fitness space hearing people who had the six pack, who were seemingly
Mhm.
thin, and just be like, yeah, I just kind of eat less. And you were describing, and I think you brought up a really good point about what it was like post contest, because it
Mhm.
wasn't until Mike had gone through a one of his shows and he was post contest and sort of struggling with this, post rebound hunger,
Yep.
out of control, food focus. And I just looked at him and I was like, damn, that's what I look like trying to lose 5 pounds. Cause
Mm,
naturally I would probably be around 165. Like
yeah.
going from 190 to like 165, 170 is a pretty easy deal. Eat some lean protein with some, I have my meals set out. It's totally fine. Like I can do the training. When I start inching closer to, 140, which is where I'm at now, it like the amount of effort and food focus and hunger that
Mhm.
results from it just sort of exponentially increases. And I'm like, man, I have all this and like I'm not even dieting for a bodybuilding show. Like, what
Yeah.
the hell?
Right.
So because I had my doctor had recommended it uh back in 2020, and at the
Mhm.
time I said no. I said
Yeah.
no because I thought, I can do this, I can handle it, I'm a smart person.
I
And then
have
2020,
willpower. I
I have
quit smoking. I
willpower,
practice.
I
Yeah.
can do this. And then just finally looking at Mike and his sort of post contest rebound, and just thinking, man, why waste all of this brain power and willpower? Let's just see what happens. And
Yeah.
so January 2022, decided to give it a shot, and lo and behold, it just felt like a light bulb had gone off in my head, to where I was
Mhm.
like, oh, this is what all of these naturally thinner people feel like,
Yeah.
being able to not have to clean your plate. I
Mhm.
can have a couple sips of wine and leave the wine glass on the table. I can have a conversation over dinner and not feel ravenous, or like, when's the food going to get here? When's the food going to get here? And then when the food gets here, I'm like not paying attention to you because I'm just trying
Yeah.
to like not like shovel food in my down my
True.
gullet, but I am shoveling food down my
Mhm.
gullet. So
Mhm.
it the whole like food obsession is just gone. I can maintain my weight. I can, if I wanted to do a fat loss diet, I could, but like I can also just live my life in
Mhm.
maintenance. And like that is something that I just haven't felt in, gosh, the last 40 years of my life.
Ever.
So
Right.
ever. It just like,
Mhm.
oh, like I can maintain this weight and not feel like it's, this mountain of like willpower that I have to struggle with. So I can eat my
Yeah.
vegetables. I can, cook my own food. I can eat, 4 balanced meals a day. I can get my steps in. I can do my training. I can do my job because I'm not so focused on food, because that was also a huge problem with,
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm like biting my nails and waiting for the next meal every like,
Yeah.
next meal. So
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's kinda what I hear across the board from, people, and it's almost like when I have clients that they'll on the low, they'll come secretly like, "I just wanna tell you that," and you guys know who I'm talking about if you're listening to this, "that I've been taking," and I'm like, "Good," because a lot of times they don't wanna bring that up to a coach because they
no.
see me and they're like, "Oh, Pam competed," and yes, I don't talk about all my struggles and stories and all the things that
Yeah.
happened 20 years ago. I mean, on
Yeah.
some levels I do, but I'm here today and I'm here to help other people.
Right.
But it's almost like I know as a coach standpoint too, like they don't want to tell you when they're not doing good. When we
Mhm.
know as coaches, we love you no matter what. Like that's
Yeah.
our literal job. We
Yeah.
we are working for you.
Yeah.
Like we want to be proud of you no matter
Yeah.
what, you know, and we all
Right.
understand the struggle, but sometimes there's this bit of shame that
Uh-huh.
they want to try it,
Yeah.
or they say, well, my doctor gave me a prescription, or I've been taking it. And I'm like, good. I need to be part of that conversation though,
Yeah.
because
Right.
as a coach, I need to know some of these things because that's going to help me help you. And there's
Exactly.
zero shame, you know,
No.
and I that's why I love your story. And that's why I really wanted you to come on part of, because you
Yeah.
are reducing, and I know you know this, the stigma of
Yeah.
that for women. Because so many people, but especially women, 40 and over,
Yeah.
are supposed to have it all together. And, especially professional women,
Yeah.
right?
Agree.
And we're supposed to have it together, and we're not supposed to have these struggles or talk about them. And it's almost like viewed as a weakness.
Oh, yeah.
And I just want to just grab everybody and just give them a hug. Like, no, we're
No.
all weak, but together we're strong.
Right. Like we all have stuff, I love
Yeah.
that, anytime somebody sort of, low key like thank you so much. I'm like, thank you for sharing,
Yeah.
that bit with me, because I think it's always, I was very concerned in the beginning, like what are people going to think about me? Yeah, and you're going to get some nasty comments on the internet from people who don't matter. Like, yeah, I'm
And
looking
that
at you.
don't understand it.
True. And
Yeah.
but there's on YouTube, there's a very, there's levels to this. So it's just it's hard, but I think I started to realize how many people were reaching out and saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, like thank you so much for sharing and opening up that conversation. Like I've been taking this and I've just been really struggling with feeling sort of, the shame, the stigma."
Yeah.
And this is from everybody, from physicians
Yeah.
to other professionals to, the general population. So I've got it's been really great to just be like, yeah, this is me. This is
I
who I
love it.
am. And if you don't like it, like there's plenty of other places on the internet you can go to.
Yeah.
Like hats off
And
to you.
it feels so good to just be you, right?
Yeah.
It's so refreshing, and it's so comfortable and confident. And, so we appreciate your journey. I wanted you to talk about
Yeah.
how do they exactly work? Because
Mhm.
not only are you a patient, but you're somebody that can explain that to us. So how
Yeah.
do the GLP-1 medications work? And they've been around a long time. How
They
long
have.
have they been around? Because that's always like, oh, are they safe?
Yeah.
So are they safe? How long have they been around? And how do they actually work? Like what's the magic?
Right. So there's a couple of different for the satiety. Okay, let's just take a step back. So as
Mhm.
far as these medications have been around, the first GLP-1 agonist was exenatide or Byetta.
Mm.
That was FDA approved for type 2 diabetes back in 2005.
Oh, wow.
So we've had these drugs for type 2
Long.
diabetes for a pretty long time. It's, 19 years or so.
Yeah.
The hormones, GLP-1, the GLP-1 hormone was isolated and characterized either in the early 1970s or 1980s.
Oh,
So,
wow.
and the first set of studies, the whole hypothesis that like there were these magic hormones in the gut that help signal the pancreas to tell the pancreas that like, we need insulin. I mean, that hypothesis was, generated and tested out in the early 1900s. So people
Mm.
have been studying
This
the
type of
GLP-1, these hormones for,
mm.
a decade, like, gosh, 120 years or
Yeah.
so. And then, the first drugs to kind of target this as a diabetes medication, has been around on the market for almost 20 years. So this didn't like come out yesterday where we just decided, hey, like this is this new thing. I feel like, working in having a brief stint in the pharmaceutical industry, people just have no idea the timelines it takes or it
Yeah.
took prior to AI to just generate these drugs. I mean, years,
Yeah,
like
that's a
decades.
long time. See, I look at them a little, but
Yeah.
I had no idea that they were around
Yeah.
that long, or at
Yeah.
least studied that long. So they've been around that long.
Yeah.
how do they work? Like, I've heard they work on like, the digestion. Do they work on your
Mhm.
brain? How do they work?
Yeah. Yeah, so the, what happens is once you, ingest food,
Mhm.
ingest, carbohydrates, goes through, your GI tract, and then in the small intestine, you have, certain cells in the small intestine that, realize that the food's coming down the pipeline, so it deploys, releases the GLP-1, hormone, as well as the GIP hormone, the gastric inhibitory peptide. So that is those are both in the incretin class. So what that does is once those two hormones are out, it'll signal to the pancreas to release insulin, and
Mhm.
then from there, insulin can kind of uptake glucose and into the muscles and stuff like that. Um, so the as far as other areas in which it can work on. There are parts of the brain that have GLP-1 receptors.
Mhm.
So it'll also affect, that's how it affects mainly satiety.
Okay.
The GLP-1
So
also
that's in the
has,
brain. That's in the brain.
yes, yes.
Society's in the brain. Okay. Trying to break it
Yeah.
down, dumb it
No,
down
it's
for
all
me.
good. No, 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 it's all good. And if you ask me what parts of the brain it affects, my neuro is not that strong. So I always kind of muck like the brain has always just been like this
We'll just call
nebulous
it the
thing.
brain. It's
Yeah,
fine. The
we'll call
brain's
it.
good for this conversation.
um, it'll also kind of it slows down gastric emptying, and what that means is, so your stomach is this pouch, it'll release chemicals to kind of chemically break down your food, and then every now and again the kind of sphincter, or the hole that kind of separates the end of the stomach to the rest of the intestines, like it'll periodically open up, and the bolus, or the chunk of food will kind of go from the
I'm
stomach to the
following it.
intestines.
I got the picture. I'm
Yeah, yeah, so it actually slows that down on purpose by design. That
okay.
also helps you feel full.
Okay. So that's the physical feeling. And the other portion would be working on the brain through the hormone
Yeah,
connections.
correct.
Okay. All right. So I see, I got it. You're
Mhm.
good. See, if you can explain it to me and I can explain it back, you are good.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
um, and so all of those things. So obviously it works on your appetite, works on your brain,
Yeah.
through the hormones, and and then the physical part of it. Because I have heard too, and that's one of the biggest things. I have this one girl, and she knows who I'm talking about. She is one of the biggest success stories that I have, and
Wow.
you would love her. She's amazing. She has a great weight loss story and loves lifting weights now. And
Yay.
she started taking these drugs a few years back, and
Mhm.
she did all of the hard work, like learned how to eat and,
Yeah.
built the muscle and all of those things. But she just could almost in tears tell me, Pam, the food noise they talk about is gone. And she
Mhm.
would just, I mean, I get chills just thinking
Yeah.
about, just feel her emotions. She's
Yeah.
like, it's so, she just couldn't describe it. And
Yeah.
and so to see that, I was just like, yeah, these are great for some people,
Yeah.
and so she would always talk about the food noise. But then I did have a question too. It says, is there faster handling of fat in the liver? Somebody asked me that. Like, does it deal with the fat in the liver at all? Or is there, is that not a component?
Oh, like the fat, like a fatty liver, does it
Yeah.
help? Like, is that
Mhm.
what she's talking
I
about?
think so. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So,
So,
because you know how like
yeah.
sometimes people are like, do zone two cardio, and they're like, it burns slow fat. And so I think that's maybe the same conversation that they're asking the
Yeah.
question of.
You know, I'm not sure if it doesn't directly affect the liver, and I'm not even sure if people I'd have to go back and look at the literature. I would
Mhm,
imagine that with the weight loss or the fat
mhm.
loss and all of those components that can kind of come as a result of taking the medication and eating sort of less, that it would most certainly help with people with I
So it
forget
helps
the
with but the drug itself doesn't work.
Doesn't
Okay.
that I am not to my knowledge, because there's a whole host of other things, like cardioprotective, can
Mhm,
help with bone density, that I have not seen that on the table, but that doesn't mean
mhm.
that it doesn't happen. I would say more of a secondary effect.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So yeah, so let's talk about real quickly the secondary kind of things, because then I
Yeah,
have a camp full of friends that are in the aesthetic space and the beauty space, and
yeah,
they'll take it for the 10 pounds of vanity. And for me, I'm like, if you can get your hands on it and that's what you want to do and you're doing it safely, whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah,
um they are taking it for, and sometimes maybe they're convincing themselves, and I would say that to them, so I'm sure they're
yeah.
listening. Well, it protects my brain. So what's that conversation?
The kind of I've been very thankful in that, if it's just somebody who truly does like, I guess it would have to depend on like what their, overall status or what their body composition looks like. I think having some, talking to them, if they're just like, I just need this for this like photo shoot, as a physician, I definitely would not be recommending that sort
Mhm,
of, drug in that way. I can't
mhm.
stop them, certainly. I think there's a wide variety of providers that some are okay with that and some
Yeah,
aren't. I'm not as comfortable with somebody who has like 5 pounds to lose and is just like, I just need this one little thing to kind of make it all
yeah.
work, so like,
But
let's take a look. Right.
they'll say, well, there's protect. They're coming out with all this information. It's good for your brain, and I take a low dose. How's that conversation? Because my thinking for severe cardiac patients, or even people that are trying to lose weight and just can't, because I mean, outside of this conversation, so it would be a whole nother conversation. Obesity is a disease, and and this is one of the medications that I see could change that. I've
Right.
seen help people.
Right.
Um, I think it's a little unfair for the people that can't get it. And so for the people that are using it for those few pounds, but they are convincing that it's good for their brain. Um,
Yeah, I
the low
haven't really
dosage.
I haven't seen. I know I had actually heard, and I haven't had a chance to sort of look into the literature about how, it being, reducing inflammation with,
Ah,
sort of
okay.
this microdosing. For those people,
That's what they're saying. It was
right?
microdosing. Yeah. Mhm.
I had started to hear. I actually heard about that, at Andrew Coates's conference,
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
Edmonton this past weekend, and I just haven't had
Mhm.
a chance to loop back to it. But for thankfully, as far as the shortages go, I know that they have built some additional manufacturing facilities in
Good.
the last year or so to kind of help with that. And let's be real, the market supply and demand is, or has its pros and cons, but I know for a fact that there are compounding pharmacies, which I
Mhm.
don't necessarily, that have their own pros and cons as well, where some of these people are getting their medications from. I don't necessarily recommend it. There are
Yeah.
places where you can, there are ways to get the medication without feeling like you are kind of impacting the supply, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's also a second thing to keep in mind, because I know the ethics of, kind of, part of that guilt is like, oh, I could, somebody else could be using it as well. Well, how, if you want to don't, if you want to be a helpful person, go donate to charity, go donate, volunteer your time somewhere. Like,
You need blood.
right. At a certain point, like, you have to be selfish and kind of think about yourself sometimes, and
Yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah.
this is, so there's
Yeah.
levels to this.
I like what you said in the very beginning, back to when in your 20s, when you said, "Well, I don't want to feel like this anymore and I'm going to
Yeah,
do X, Y, and Z." But then when you said finally, when, Mike tried to, even help you with
yeah,
all of his abilities that he could, through, the nutrition portion,
yeah,
you can give so much. so many nutrition plans and so much chicken and rice and feed you and all of these things and behavioral components, right?
Yeah.
Of nutrition. But you said, why am I going to suffer
Yeah.
any longer
Yeah.
and just at least not try it? So the other part of that conversation has to be, what are some of the side effects that can happen? Did you
Yeah.
experience some? And if I have had a few people that have tried them, because I will say, hey, why don't you just try them? Like, your
Mhm.
doctor's prescribing these, just try it. You still have to do the work.
Right.
You're going to be doing the work anyway. You're going to
Yeah.
be exercising. It is not the easy way out, I
Yeah.
promise, because
Yeah.
I'm going to work you harder the more shape you get in. So no worries. But what if they just can't take it because they just feel yucky?
It's
Side
always
effects?
yeah, no, great question, because there with any medication there's always, side
A risk.
effects that you have to
Sure.
keep in mind. So, when I had initially started on the 0.25, I definitely had a little bit of nausea to start with.
Mhm.
And I was also doing jujitsu, and that did not help, like, rolling around on the floor really
Oh, yeah.
kind of threw me out. Yeah. So it goes away. It went away
Okay.
after a month. And then
Okay.
from there it was, I never actually went up to like a full dose. I think the dose for Wegovy, which is the trade name for semaglutide.
Mhm.
Um,
Tomato,
so
tomato.
yeah, they come in full single dose pens.
Mhm.
And so I think the highest dose is like 2.5. I probably would also just not eat anything and shrivel into, like, nothingness. So I think at most,
Oh.
so it's, monitoring that dose is super important.
So if it's
I from
too high, somebody could make it lower, and if it was too much, you're saying?
Yeah, but also, like, I don't know, what other physicians are doing sometimes. Like, I know that there's levels to this, but, I never went higher than, like, 1 milligram a week, which
Okay.
is probably about half of what is available for weight loss. So,
Mhm.
when you combine, and that was allowing me to just decrease the noise so I can eat my food on maintenance. I can eat my
Mhm.
food in a fat loss phase. Like, I
Mhm.
can, you know, so I think it comes, the side effects are most common are
Mhm.
nausea, vomiting, and then constipation is part of it. But I also feel like constipation is also because people aren't eating anything. It's like, at the end of a contest prep, it's like, yeah, no shit. You're like eating like a total bird. Like,
Yeah,
even
you
if
don't
you
have
added.
anything to poop.
Right, there's not, what goes in must come out, that whole thing, like, we
You're
can't,
using everything that goes in at that level. Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. And so did you said you experienced just a little nausea. Um, you would just
I did vomit
okay.
at one point, that once,
Okay.
so, ooh, maybe twice, but part of it was also training, like,
Mm.
I was also hard training, and so, um, hard to
Combine the
say, but
2.
yeah, whether it was, like, the drug itself versus, like, yeah, you were in the gym and you kinda pushed it a little hard.
So you would say to somebody that was taking this with a legitimate reason, that was having some side effects, and they have tried everything, right? And they're
Mhm,
doing the work, or maybe they're discouraged and can't do the work because they
mhm.
just can't seem to lose the weight and they start giving up all of the time. And they're having some side effects. You say maybe give it a few weeks. And
Yeah, definitely give it a few weeks.
Mhm.
If it depending on how severe it is,
Mhm.
if it completely prohibits them from eating anything, that becomes a problem, and that you need to look into either decreasing the dose or stopping entirely and kind
Yeah.
of, talk to your doctor about these. I think, encouraging them to have these conversations like, hey, like, this is making me throw up all the damn time and I can't eat any food. Like, this is a problem. We
And
need
then
to,
I'm weak, so I can't work
right,
out and I can't do my day-to-day stuff, because I think that
right,
was the concerns a lot. Like, I
right.
can't work out because I don't have any energy because I can't eat
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so talk to your physician, but again,
Mhm.
you're unique, you're in the small percentage of, that's why I followed you, of women in muscle, and we know the grit and the struggle, and there's just something about that community, you're like, "Yeah, you like biceps." And you work hard. And so part of that is like, okay, this really sucks, but I'm going to embrace this suck a little bit and I'm going to push through just for a few weeks. That delayed gratification that we all understand.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's kind of what you're pushing through with the medication as well. Not everybody has that. So you're suggesting push through. But then what if they're getting it from one of these like med spas? Because they're all over the place and they just have maybe a PA or something like that. And they're all it is just like hustling out these drugs because sometimes that's the case too. What about that kind of?
I think it becomes even more important that if you are an online, coach or an in-person personal trainer who interacts with these people, who
Mhm,
somebody who is getting it from a med spa may not be so, having that conversation. I don't know what those conversations look like.
mhm.
Check in with them, be like, how, or if you notice their training is totally they're tanking
Yeah.
at the gym, like what's going on? Like, thinking about like, are you able to eat food? Are you throwing up all the time? Like
Mhm,
how is your appetite? Because I know that some people, you know, I had one person reach out and had also struggled their entire lives, and like to think that now I now know what a skinny person feels like, and I'm not
mhm.
eating anything and I'm constipated all the time, but that feeling of satiety that I've never experienced is so
Mhm.
good that
Yeah,
there's no way in hell I'm going to go back and, try and decrease, the dose because this just feels too good. And
sure.
so just continuing to have those conversations with your clients about, how are their days going? How is how's your appetite? Like, are you
Mhm,
getting, is the scale weight dropping? Is it going up or like staying still? Like, really just facilitating that rapport that sometimes healthcare providers just don't have the time or and are
mhm,
unable
mhm. Yeah,
to do that. And letting them know like, hey, something serious is a problem, like I can't, I can't maintain, I can't maintain anything down, like you should go talk to your doctor about that, and like
yeah,
insist that like this is a problem, like
yeah.
so
And they can make a change that way by being an advocate for
right.
themselves.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so what about long-term use? So I've heard you say in a
Mhm.
couple other interviews, like, you could see yourself right now, at least with the information that you have and the feelings that you have today,
Mhm.
things change, but right now you could see yourself using this as some capacity forever.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so what does that look like? Does that look like you cycling on and off? Does it look like you lower dose, higher dose? What does that look like for somebody that kind of may have to use these forever?
Um, if the maintenance, that's a great thing. I can't remember who, apologies for, sort of just taking this, without quoting. Somebody said like, for people who have a problem with taking it, sort of on a chronic basis, well, we still have to diet and exercise on a, regular basis for the rest
Yeah,
of our lives. So like
yeah,
we're gonna stop doing that too. So,
yeah.
um, I think now I'm in a spot where I actually don't want to lose any more weight. I don't want to get any leaner because the thing with GLP-1 agonist medications is, it'll help you with food noise for sure. It'll help you with your hunger, but it doesn't help with your inability. It'll, when dieting, you have, markers of diet fatigue where like your sleep turns
Sure.
to crap, your
Yep.
brain sort of feels like all over the place. You have high sympathetic drive. So
Mhm.
the GLP-1s don't address those parts of fat loss dieting.
Okay.
So for me to get any leaner would be a huge resource of like I would just be my head would be in the clouds of like because wouldn't be eating anything.
Mhm.
I already maintain on a pretty low set of calories
Yeah.
comparatively to other people. So the it doesn't the trade-off doesn't seem worth it, so I am perfectly content on just whatever dose I'm on right now,
Yeah.
continuing that. I may or may not decide to go down in dose just to see,
To see how you do
just
and
to
feel,
see.
just
Yeah,
because, yeah, because why
right.
not?
Right, because why not? Like,
Yeah,
it's, but
just to see.
I mean, you take away the drug, the food noise will return, and
Mhm.
then where do we
I've
end
heard
up?
that before too, and I have had some clients say, "Oh, I just feel like I need to go back and get more," and I'm like, "Well, go talk to your doctor,"
Yeah.
because there is literally no shame.
Mhm.
I think I've heard a lot of physicians say this, and Dr. Jordan Feigenbaum was on, and he's a big one that just kind of made me laugh, made me think years ago. He said, nobody is going to be at your grave saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, they did it pharma free." Like, nobody cares. You don't get any gold stars. We just want you to feel well.
Yeah.
And if feeling well without abusing a drug and
Yeah.
something that we have available, I mean, talk about aging, and we're in
Yeah.
our 40s, and sometimes people will compare, oh, the Golden Girls were in their 40s. I'm like, well, if the Golden Girls had access to Botox, they wouldn't look like that. So there's all these things that
Yeah.
that they didn't have,
Yeah.
you know? So I just feel like that's not a good really good comparison.
Yeah.
It's yeah,
Definitely.
so it's okay to be on long term as
Yes.
far as
Yes.
and you see yourself kind of being on it long
Yeah.
term,
Oh,
no
yeah.
issues. Now talk to real quick the person that would stop working out and says, "I just want to take this. I hate working out." Because we live in a small percentage of the world that, my husband, he owns a CrossFit gym, and we live around a bubble of people that enjoy working out.
Yeah.
But the majority of people don't like to work out. So
Yeah.
what do you say to the person, especially the girls, especially the younger girls, and even the older, I guess,
Yeah.
that just say, I'm just going to take this. I can lose weight, because that's ultimately sometimes layer number one of your health is to get at a good body composition.
Oh, yeah.
And that you and I both know, okay, that's sometimes step one, because the cholesterol, diabetes, all these things that are happening. What about the people that don't want to exercise? Speak to them.
So if we're talking about somebody who's young, and
Mhm.
do they have an okay are these still the same 5 to 10 pound,
These are
5
the
pounders?
people that need to lose a good 20, 30, 40, 50 plus pounds, that just say, my friend lost 30 pounds on this. I'm not going to exercise, because I can just eat a cheeseburger, every couple days and be good,
So,
and not work out, because and I'm like, don't work out for, we don't work out for fat loss,
mhm,
but they don't hear that because they just want to see the size. And this speaks to women that are 40, 50, 60 years old,
mhm.
that also just want to be small.
Yeah. I've got a couple things to say to that.
Yes.
One, yeah, definitely, one, definitely not a gatekeeper in the sense of like you have to do I think there's levels to this, especially when you're thinking about people who are 20, 30, 40 pounds overweight.
Mhm.
The excess body fat is still an issue. And so
Mhm.
for those people, I think we would have to have definitely start building on the rapport, but I would not give them a hard no just because like, okay, you're not going to do this, you're not going to do this thing that I want for you. I think still actually losing the weight is still preferable,
Benefit. Mhm.
beneficial compared to not giving them anything and, just being like, goodbye. So I feel
Yeah.
like it's the equivalent to somebody who is on anabolic steroids and has high blood pressure and the doctor saying like, yeah, no, you're just going to have to stop steroids. That's going to fix your blood pressure. I'm not going to do anything to it
Oh,
today, even
yeah.
though it's 180 over 110. Like, have a nice day. Just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's one thing. And then the cheeseburger, I do have a quick story about that. One of the
Mhm.
things that can happen that's a little bit more serious, but less likely to, less of a common side effect is having gallstones and
Mm.
pancreatitis. So
Ah,
inflammation in the pancreas. And so I've also noticed in some people who eat, like once they start the medication, fatty foods become a little bit more of a tricky situation to navigate in the sense that like either they don't feel well or they end up getting really sick with super high fat foods. I've had people like throw up from, you know,
oh, yeah,
um,
because they
you know,
can't digest it, you mean?
yeah, and just the gallbladder just, after a while just isn't, just decides that, I feel like if you're eating a bunch of low calories, and I think that's also a reason why having nutrition coaches, new fitness professionals really take somebody down on a controlled, slow caloric deficit versus just crash dieting,
Yeah.
because you see this with bariatric surgery patients is, if they start crash dieting, formation of gallstones is a huge problem. And then the
Oh,
gallstones get lodged in and, sort of mess with the pancreas. And then it becomes this whole issue that you have to go to the hospital. So,
that's not good.
yeah. So, don't recommend just eating a cheeseburger. But I guess
Yeah.
if you're somebody who eats 4 cheeseburgers a day, like,
But we should always have the underlying understanding, like you said, for health reasons to
yes.
lift weights.
Oh,
And
yes.
and I guess that was to my point too, is they just think, well, because they might look at me and say, I'm 5'4" on a good day, and I'm between at my lowest 138 to
Mhm.
145 any given day.
Mhm.
And some people just have in their mind, and for me, I'm like, I love this weight,
Yeah.
but for some people, they just have their mind like, I want to be 120 or 125, and they just have this number, and they just don't want to exercise. They don't want to lift weights because they cannot. They just want to take a medication, and they want to eat less, and they want to just be a smaller version of themselves, and without the health benefits of resistance training,
Mhm.
because they only see exercise as a component of weight loss.
Yeah.
So I want you to speak to them,
Yeah.
especially, I would say you spoke to the younger, so let's talk to the people that are older, that just want to be frail and skinny.
It's interesting because I have had a lot of older individuals
Mhm.
kind of point out the muscles. And so a lot of times I've had women in their 50s and their 60s who have starved themselves for,
Yeah.
periods of time and don't lift the weights. And so their thing is they like grab my arm and they're like, how can I get firm arms like you? Because uh,
I
ideally
love it.
that when you show people pictures of like, people pick a number, like some nebulous number, like I want to be
They do.
110 pounds.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you showed people pictures of like what women's bodies look like, people want a little bit of defined arms, like they want a leaner body. So what they
Yes.
are really looking for is somebody who has built the muscle and has lost the fat. And so you have that nice shape. Like if we're just
Mhm.
talking, I feel like entertaining their desires and acknowledging that, like, okay, what you really want is some toned arms. You really want, a little bit of muscle and a lot less fat, because I've tried to do the starvation diet without any resistance training, and I just had like a flabbier version of my arm with like
Yeah.
no shape whatsoever. And so
Yeah.
um, I feel like getting people on that level sort of speaks to them. And so they'll start to listen instead of like, oh, yeah, osteoporosis. And like, it's great for, you want to live, activities of daily living,
Independently.
your
Yeah.
balance. They're going to just be like, yeah, whatever. I just want like to not
Sure.
have this
That's
chicken
true.
wing arm. And then when
Yep.
I do the like picture thing, I have to do this hip to the side because
Yeah.
I have
We
no
all know the
tone to my
skinny arm. Yeah.
right. I used to do that. I used to do that all the time and then be mad
Yeah.
because I had no muscle in my arms. So the yeah, the when you diet down and you don't resistance train, you're just gonna end up with a lot of times I feel like women just end up with this unshapely sort of, kind of
Yeah.
physique that, and then they end up getting sad, and then they'll look at, my arms and be like, okay, how do I get like like shapely arms like that? I'm like, yeah, we got to lift some weights. You got to eat
Yeah.
some protein and you actually got to fuel yourself every now and again. Like we can't be in a caloric deficit forever. Right. So
Yeah, and that was my conversation, and we'll wrap it up here in a second.
yeah.
From before, like we can't stay in fat loss forever.
Yeah.
And my thinking is always, and this is what I at least I tell my clients from my own experience
Yeah.
of chasing fat loss for. I mean, I literally chased for 10 years a look to be on a stage. Like I get it,
Yeah.
to fit into a bikini that could fit
Hmm.
into a sandwich bag to be judged for my
Hmm.
body.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
understand. But to be in fat loss forever is not even emotionally healthy,
Yeah. Correct.
for yourself. So you want to get in and out of a fat loss phase.
Yep.
But you could still use these medications, and you still
Hmm.
need to be, resistance training for a body shape, but for health.
Hmm.
Um, and and that needs to be at some capacity forever. And really quickly on
Yeah.
your medication, if you're not hungry, how do you get yourself to eat? And what does that kind of look like as far as what are you suggesting for the protein and, that kind of thing for women in general? Like, everybody knows to eat protein, but what's your suggestion for their grams of protein or what they should be aiming for at minimum if they're taking these medications and they're really trying? But what should they be eating? And how do you get around that? Like if you just feel full?
Yeah. Yeah. I shakes. I will, a variety of ways. I have I like to be prepared, so I have the Fairlife protein shakes,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
nutrition plan. Like those are just things that are tasty.
Mhm.
The Also just protein powder. I mix it with some almond milk. Like I just have things in various easy to grab capacity that doesn't make it such that so that's kind of my go-to if I'm super busy, I've got a crazy day at work, what do I have, I want something that's now tasty because I'm not super hungry, so
Yeah.
I will grab something that is tasty and
Okay.
delicious. Um,
What's your
and
favorite protein?
I like a bunch of different brands. So, the
What's your go-to?
recently I've been trying. I have Legion
Okay.
protein in my cabinet. I mean, we also have Optimum Nutrition, which is a classic.
Mhm.
Ghost protein because it's tasty.
Yeah, they have all
Um,
kinds of flavors,
they
don't
have
they?
flavors
Yeah.
that are just delicious, and you're just like, yes. Um, so those are some of my favorites. Maybe a protein bar. It's not the best, but look, man, not every meal can be I'm gonna have my chicken breast and I'm gonna have my broccoli and I'm gonna have my rice.
Yeah, we're not competing, we're not
Right.
bodybuilders.
No, nobody's,
Yeah, yeah.
but 'cause I actually love vegetables because it's just
Mhm.
good for your gut. But yeah, sometimes you're on the run. So, Built bars are, pretty tasty. I
Okay.
know that they've got a lot of collagen protein. So I try
Mhm.
not to, you know, I'll use them every now and again. Pure protein is not the tastiest, but it does the job in as
Yeah.
far as macros go. So,
'Cause you're
uh,
like, "I need to eat, I'm not that hungry, so whatever I eat has to be fast and delicious,
yes.
at the
Yeah,
time."
and a
Yeah,
very
so that's
small
okay.
size, very
Yeah. Mhm.
small size, make it happen, get it
Yeah.
in there, and done, one and done.
Yeah, because it's never and I think to your whole point of this entire conversation is that nothing is going to be seamlessly easy, and there's
No,
always going to be effort,
yeah,
on your part structuring and whether it's a medication or not medication, is to, structure your day and put in the work, and
exactly.
we have tools to help.
Yep.
Anything you wanna share last minute for, let's say, all of the women, young and old, for yeah, just some advice for their fitness and their health as a patient, as an
Mhm.
athlete, as a physician?
Yeah, I think just keeping it really simple. If I go back and tell my younger self, just continue to lift the weights,
Mhm.
continue building that muscle. You know, Dieting has its pros and cons. Today might not be the day to diet, but consistently and continually pushing your body with heavy weights is going to result in a whole lot of muscle and a whole lot of benefits that you know are going to benefit you now and also benefit you 10 years down the line. I can't tell you
Yeah,
how many times I going to the airport or going to the grocery store where I'm just so thankful that I have the ability to lift heavy weights because it has
yeah.
saved me in all sorts of places that you don't appreciate until you hit your 35, 40, 45, and beyond.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true. I was at a football game of my son's the other day, and my husband's carrying this little bag of their snacks, and I got like 3 chairs, and I'm just like, "Like, you want more?" "No, I don't actually. I got this. This is why I
Yeah.
work out." So, no, you're right, 'cause you do see and I heard you say one time, you said, "I love Mike to do things for me.
Yeah,
However, I would like to have the ability to do them myself."
exactly.
It was
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm gonna leave everything, for them, your YouTube, right?
Yes. Yes.
And then your Instagram, are those the
Yeah,
2
yeah.
best
Yep.
places?
Yep.
I'll just link them for them. That's gonna be the best way to do that, and I appreciate your time
Oh,
so
thank you so
much
much for bringing me
today.
on here. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for bringing me on here. It was
Oh,
so
yes.
lovely to chat with you.
Yes, you too. And I just adore you. I love your story, and I just need everybody under the moon to follow you.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.